called NOC Australia. And what Power Tracer is software developed by NOC, and it's used by several retailers around Australia already, that uses retrospective data. We used that word before. And what it does is a matching of electricity sales and purchases of participants as recorded by their smart meters. Victoria in particular, but most of Australia, is very blessed by the fact that smart meters have been installed in all houses, in all properties. Because that enables schemes like this to actually get up and running, to enable this sharing and a whole range of other things. So there's four major key topics here about this Power Tracer. It's retrospective data, and I'll explain that in a minute. And what it does is match sales and purchases from the data from smart meters. So what is that retrospective data that it's using? It's obtained from yesterday's readings on your smart meter. So as you go through the day, your smart meter is recording every 30 minutes how much power you're buying from the grid and how much you're selling to the grid. So what Power Tracer does is to collect those NMI readings, the National Meter Identifier readings, from each participant on a daily basis, and matches for yesterday who was selling to the grid in our group, who was buying, how can they be matched up to get a transaction from someone who wanted to sell in that 30 minutes to someone who wanted to buy in that 30 minutes. And it's important that it's in that 30 minutes. Energy cannot be stored and sold later to someone who wanted to buy it, because in reality, 30 minutes is already a gross overestimation of how long the energy is in the system. The energy is in the system virtually instantaneously. It's in, it's out. They allow 30 minutes grace for this matching. This NMI data from your smart meter is readily obtainable from your distributor, in our case AusNet, or from your retailer. Some have things on their online sites which allow you to download that data yourself. I know, for example, we're with Indigo Power and we do that. We were with PowerShop, we did it with them as well. And other retailers have the same facility. As I mentioned, the smart meter data records the electricity bought from the grid and sold to the grid in those 30-minute periods. That's the critical thing about it. Importantly, they just measure purchases and sales with the grid. They don't record how much electricity has been produced by your solar panels. They don't record how much you've put into and taken out of batteries. And they don't record how much you've used in your household. They simply record the sales and purchases. So if you think about it from the other side of the coin, if you were the distributor or the retailer, that's what you want to know. How much was bought and sold to me, the distributor or the retailer? From our side of the coin, the household, we've got a number of other things going on as well, not just sales and purchases with the grid. When you download your NMI data from AusNet, that little distinction is important to realise. Don't believe the labels that are in the data that you get. They use the title consumption for a whole bunch of their statistics. It's not consumption, it's not how much energy you use at all, it's how much you bought from the grid. Similarly, they use the word generation. It's not how much you produced or how much you generated, it's how much you sold to the grid, because you may well have used a lot of that generation yourself. I think it's a hangover from when it's a pre-solar terminology. Pre-solar, when no one was producing their own energy, what you brought from the grid is what you used. That's what you consumed. That's the only thing you could buy. Generation, well, it didn't even exist back then because you couldn't generate and you couldn't sell to the grid anyway. Just remember, it's only sales and purchases with the grid. As I say, it is readily obtainable online, and you can get it either from your retailer, whoever that is, or for everyone in our area, no matter who their retailer is, you can get it from AusNet, the distributor. And they have a website called My Home Energy. So what you do to get your smart data is to first register with My Home Energy. Then you go online and you select your NMI from the list. You might have more than one, but most of you will only have one meter. So you just select that. You select the file type required. I'll go through the screens in a minute. and then you download the data. It automatically gives you the last 2 years of data. And that's very useful for this project because given that COVID's occurred within the last 2 years, I want to look at the COVID and non-COVID data to see what gives us a representative year of data. So registering with My Home Energy, this is what you'd see online. And down the bottom left-hand side of that screen, if you haven't yet registered, you'll need to do it first, and it says register now for My Home Energy. It also says you can download your data from My Home Energy as well, but if you're not registered, it'll realise that, so that when you hit My Home Energy, it'll take you to the registration page. And a couple of important things if you haven't registered, I know some people have had some problem with this, it asks for your first name and your last name, and you think, well, that's pretty straightforward, but there's a trick involved. It has to be the first name and the last name that you have on your energy retailer bill. So it has to match the name that is on the bill that comes to you each month or each quarter, whichever it is. Just make sure you use the correct name there. The NMI, the National Meter Identifier, is also on your bill, as is your meter number. So all the top 2 lines there will come directly from a bill that you've already received. And then you just give an email, phone number, and a password. And of course, you've got to say you're not a robot. If you are registered or after you've just registered, you can then go to log in. So you'll just use your email and the password you supplied at registration. Again, confirm you're not a robot. Once you're not a robot and you get in, you'll see something like this. This is just showing you the weekly usage of your property. You can look at other things, daily, monthly, etc., etc. But what we're coming in for is to export the data for later usage. So there is up at the top of the screen a thing saying export data, which I've circled. So you just click on that. It'll take you to another screen, which will then show you your account or your NMIs. And if you've got more than one, you'll have more than one line there, but you probably only have one. And what we then want you to do is to click on that export data button again, the one that's down on towards the bottom right. Click on the little arrow next to it, and that will give you 2 options for different ways of exporting the data. Both of them will be what are called CSV files, and that's a comma separated values. So it's a very simple file format that's widely used, but they have 2 different reports. And so what you should ask for is the summary report, because then all the files will be in the same format and easier to operate with. Once you click on summary report, your data will be exported. The 2 years of your half-hourly readings for your imports and exports will come into a file, and very soon thereafter, because it's only a fairly small file, you'll find a file with a long convoluted name with lots of numbers and then saying something like AusNet Services VEC format. That'll be in your downloads folder. Once you download it, bring it across to your desktop or some folder you're working in. If you open the file in Excel, and Excel will automatically open CSV files, you'll see something like this. This is just my own file that I downloaded last week. I've just blanked out the NMI for privacy reasons, etc. And I should just make the point that if you do provide data for this project, all of the identifying information will be taken off. You'll be given a serial number. Okay, so the first column in column C is just telling you what type of reading it is. In my case, I've got 2 types. I don't have solar panels at the moment. So it shows consumption, which is just on your normal meter reading, and controlled load consumption is the other one you'll often find there. And that's for things like your hot water heating, which is on a separate circuit and which is charged differently to your normal consumption. So what I've got there is for each day, you've got 2 readings. For every half hour from midnight to 30 minutes after, it shows how much I used on each of those circuits. And that will go on for 48 time intervals, the 24 hours of the day cut into half-hourly periods. So it's a file which is about 50 columns wide, and for 2 years of data, in my case, was about 1,400 rows deep, which seems like a lot of data, but it's a very simple format and it's not a very big file at all. So getting that enables the next stage of the process to go ahead.